welcome everybody to Learn and to our next community education webinar. I'm Dee Childers with Life Changes Elder Care Consulting and Vice President of Learn and the Community Education Chair. And today our topic is transforming your life after 60. I'm so anxious to hear Laureen, what tips she has for us today. And Learn is Lifelong Education and Aging Resource Network. And we're an Idaho-based nonprofit organization with a mission to provide free community education on aging and caregiving topics. Learn is a part of the CSA, or Certified Senior Advisors Leaders Network. And CSA is an organization that educates and certifies professionals who work with seniors. Today, just the content is provided for general information purposes only and not to be considered legal, financial, or health advice. Prior to taking action, we recommend that you consult with your own professional in the appropriate area and make sure that it fits for you if you're going to implement some changes. Our sponsors today, and we're so thankful and appreciative for our sponsors, Oasis Senior Advisors and A Mind for All Seasons. Because we have sponsorship, this allows us to bring this training to all of you free of charge. So it does take operating expenses, and this semester, this quarter is sponsored by these two wonderful organizations. And today, our presenter is Laureen Quick. And Laureen and I have known each other for quite a while, reconnected more recently. And she is from the Transformational Journey. And Laureen, I apologize, I spaced pulling up your bio. Do you mind telling us who you are and what makes you so special?
Oh, I'd be happy to. I myself am 63 and soon to be in this fall 64. And I work with clients around transformational change and also around physical fitness. Most of my fitness clients are over 50, and actually, generally, most of them are in their 60s and their 70s. I do coaching on a transformational level where we talk about and work with how to transform your life, but also I will come into your home and do private fitness coaching as well and help you get physically fit, because I think the two actually go together very well. What else can I say about myself? I have gone through many transformations in my life. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized this is a process that we all go through, because I truly do believe our purpose in life is to evolve, is to transform and to move into deeper and deeper, more complex levels of understanding, of contribution, of connection with people. And over time, I've evolved and began working with a model that helps do that for myself, but then also for my clients. And I'm here today to share more about that in particular, especially as it relates to someone who is older, beyond the age of 60. But everything I talk about today really applies to any age. But we all begin to face, I think, as we get older, the opportunities to transform. And some of us jump and take advantage of those, and others of us resist them. And I'm here to talk about how you can be the former versus the latter, and have a little bit of fun while doing it.
Excellent, excellent. So the screen is ready for you to share if you'd like to.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And hopefully this is what we're going to get. Let's see if that works. And I'm going to slide myself into play mode. Wonderful. All right. And so I will just key in or off of what I just said. I really do believe that our purpose in life is to evolve and to grow and to transform as human beings. And I believe that we can read about it. We can watch other people do it, but it's not an intellectual thing. It really is something that happens to us through our experiences. And that the challenge in transforming ourselves is to have an intention, have an intended purpose behind changing ourselves, growing ourselves, and then also opening ourselves up to experiences that let us do exactly that. And again, that's what we are going to talk about today, embracing those opportunities and changing and growing as that happens in our lives. When we're 60, we do encounter, I think, lots of opportunities, whether it's, one of the biggies is when if you have children, all of our kids leave home and we're empty nesters and people look at each other and wonder, what am I going to do next? Sometimes it's the retirement thing where we quit the job that has defined us for many years, and now we don't know what to do with ourselves, or we don't know who we are because we've spent our whole life defining ourselves based on the work that we do. In some cases, it's death, that our partners or people that we love die, and we're not quite sure what we're supposed to do when we pick up those pieces. Where do we go? How do we fit into the world? So as we age, lots of opportunities for us to transform. And again, as I've mentioned, the real challenge is taking advantage of those opportunities and using them to the max to get your money's worth, to get the biggest bang out of the buck, so they say, or whatever that term is. And so we're going to talk about that today. How do we embrace change in a way that's intentional and that it leads to redefining who we are? That's a positive experience for us, and also, I would hope, a joyful experience. And that's the focus for this afternoon. So to begin, I want to talk about the hero's journey, because this is the model that I use for myself and that I use with my clients. And the work that Joseph Campbell has done, he was an academic out of, I believe, Sarah Lawrence College, and he did a lot of work around studying different cultures. And he noticed that every culture he ever studied told the same story. Every culture tells this story of the hero. And you can look to our cinema, our movies to see this, or our literature. So you think of movies like Alice in Wonderland, or The Matrix, or Terminator. Any action movie today, any action story today, you see a hero who goes through some sort of journey. The Hobbit, for example, or The Lord of the Rings. They always have one main character who is the hero, surrounded by a group of people that are supporting and helping and assisting. And we'll talk more about those folks as we go through this process. And they journey through a process that evolves and develops them. Joseph Campbell says that there are basically, and he has a very complex model, and I've simplified it down. He basically would argue, though, there are three main parts to this journey. The departure from the unknown. That's where we leave the normal everyday world that we live in, and we move into another world where we're not sure what the rules are. We don't know where we're going. We're not even certain sometimes who's with us and who's not, but we depart. And we'll talk about that in detail as we go through the process this afternoon. The second step is we go through a path that I would call a path of temptation and a path of trial. And we'll go into detail around what exactly the temptation is, what exactly the trials are that we will face. And then finally, we have a point in the journey where we begin to return home, and we have to start re-entry, so to speak, back to an ordinary way of life. So those are the three main pieces to this journey, and we're going to break them up and talk about each of those three phases as we go through the course of the next half hour, 45 minutes. Any questions so far? Good. All righty. Welcome those that have joined us. So to begin, and I when I work with my clients, I always tell them, you are the hero of your story. And most people go, oh, I'm not no hero. I may be the victim of my story, but I'm not the hero. And I'm here to tell you that, yes, you are. If you look at, what defines a hero, you can get some traditional definitions through your dictionaries. But I would say that really, when you begin the hero's journey, when you begin your process of transformation, what's important is just to understand that you are becoming this hero. And a lot of times in the stories that you'll see, the hero doesn't even think of themselves as a hero, but over time you will evolve. But you are, in fact, the central character in the story that you're about to experience. You are the hero. You may not believe it now, but you will evolve and achieve your goals, and also show great courage. Part of the process is developing that courage. Part of the process is achieving your goals. So you don't have to be perfect as a hero, but you are, in fact, a hero. And it really helps for you to start to think, I am the hero or heroine of this story. And I'm excited and curious to find out how this whole story evolves and plays out. The call is the first step. And what happens is we can get the call to change by some of those events that I just talked about. Maybe our children leave us and go off to college or out into the world to live their lives, and we suddenly find ourselves in that empty nest and alone. Perhaps a spouse dies or divorces us or whatever, and we get kind of kicked in the gut, and suddenly we're like, who do I define myself now? I quit my job, I retire, who am I now? So sometimes events will cause this to happen, quote unquote, to you. Sometimes people actually make the choice to call, to take a call. So you may consciously quit your job and decide to retire versus having a layoff that would cause that to happen to you. Either way, many people decide they don't want to do it. They're like, no. In fact, it was funny. I was just reading something today in a social group I am in on Facebook, and this person said, oh, I was ready to give my notice, and I was going to quit my job, and I was going to get this van, and I was going to travel around the country. I mean, literally, I was writing the letter to resign, and poof, they gave me a promotion, and I just accepted the promotion, and now I'm not going. And so that person's decided, I don't want to accept the call. Now, 3 months from now, they could come into work and find out they're laid off, and boom, suddenly, well, now I guess I am going to accept the call. Most of us feel a lot better about the call when we've decided to take it ourselves versus having someone give us that shove. But there's always a choice in whether you're going to accept the call or you're going to decline it. When you choose, as I indicated just minutes ago, I think it's more empowering that, I can remind myself, oh, I was the one that said I wanted to do this. No one did this to me. I'm not the victim here. I am truly choosing this. That makes me feel different about going on a hero's journey, going on a path of transformation, because I knew I chose it. And my own experience also is that when I refuse the call, more often than not, within some amount of time, I get pushed off a cliff, because we're destined to transform. We're destined to change. And if we consciously choose not to, sometimes life intervenes for us and says, well, sorry you feel that way, but here's your opportunity now to move forward and to learn more about yourself, to learn more about the world, to experience more with people, and develop greater connection and relationships. Either way, the hero begins the journey by push comes to shove, or by choosing intentionally to take this leap. You cross this threshold into an unknown world. Once you go across it, there is this huge temptation, and you may struggle with this temptation for months of going back. So you see a lot of folks who they are in a bad relationship and they leave their partner. They've consciously chose to leave, and then they end up remarrying or getting back together with the person that they left 3 months later, because it's pretty rough out here in that world of uncertainty. And I really am very uncomfortable. And man, it really looks pretty good now looking back on what I had. And so I go back to what I had before. Or if I don't go back to exactly what I had before, I go and get exactly the same job that I just left to create the exact same experience, because I am so comfortable with what I had. Even though I was miserable, at least I was comfortable and it's predictable. So every time a process begins of transformation, you may find yourself looking fondly back at what you had and thinking, that really wasn't so bad after all. Maybe I'll just go back to doing that. It'll be better. And I'm here as a coach to tell you, no, it won't be better. You will once again in 3 months or 3 weeks or 3 days wonder why in the world you said yes to going back, and you will again assert yourself and get back on your path. But the reality is the path that you're moving onto is full of uncertainty. You don't know what the rules are. You don't know who you are. You don't know what's going to happen. And human beings, we get really anxious and nervous about that. And so one of the biggest challenges we have is to learn to live with uncertainty. to learn to take deep breaths and relax and trust that whatever is going to happen is going to happen, and I'm ready for it. And in fact, it will be thrilling, it will be exciting, it will evolve me. I really emphasize to myself when I'm going through these periods in time, and to my clients, you really want to get up every day and give yourself a pep talk that, this was my choice. Even if I got kicked over the cliff, now I've chosen to continue forward with this journey, and I'm going to embrace every moment of it. I'm going to take advantage of every moment of it. I'm ready for this. I was born for this, and we keep going. So prepare for the temptation, because it will come. Then there are two main challenges that you will face on your journey. The first one is going to be the past and working to let it go. The second one is going to be the future, and that involves embracing the future. So when I am going through a major transformation, I will often, and I'll talk about journaling as a tool in a little bit, I will journal. And one of the things I will do is I will look at the end of the day, and I will say, okay, where did the temptation to go back to the old way of being, where was that in my day? And let's reflect on that. Where in the last 24 hours did I have opportunities to let go of the past and I resisted that? Or maybe if I'm really lucky, I actually embraced it and did some letting go. Where in this day did I see the opportunity to embrace the future? When I think about and watch this process, a lot of times up front at the very beginning, it's that temptation to go back that's there a lot. And the letting go of the past is there a lot. The future doesn't really come into play until I've worked through some of those issues about letting go and about affirming that I truly am on this path and I've made this choice. So eventually, as you evolve, so think about this as a continuum, and about, the first 25% of the path, maybe up to the first 50%, a lot of that really is focused on letting go of old ways of thinking, old ways of being, junk that we carry around with us about expectations, about roles that we've played. And that as you work to release those expectations, as you work to release that past, suddenly you find yourself more open to the possibilities of the future. And as you move into the second half of the journey, more and more, it's about what kind of future do I want for myself? Who do I want to be? And in that part of the journey, it's about embracing the future in the sense of seeking joy. So what I tell myself is, what I tell my clients, look for every opportunity to experience joy. And when that opportunity shows up, say yes to it. And that over time, the more you say yes to joy, the greater clarity you are going to eventually get about the future and where you want to go and who you are and what you want to be. But again, at the beginning, you're really dealing with a lot of stuff from the past. And how that actually shows itself is we start doing a lot of clearing. And I would bet you money every time I work with someone, they come back to me at some point and say, man, I just went through my house and threw away just about everything I thought I would keep forever. I dumped all the clothes that were in my closet that I haven't worn in 10 years. I've thrown away all the books. I mean, I just had a garage sale and got rid of half of everything I own. What I see happening in this process is we're letting go first materially, what's in our lives that has cluttered up our lives. But the more we reduce clutter in our physical realm, the more we also start releasing clutter in our minds. And we start letting go of what I thought was supposed to happen, who I thought I was supposed to be, where I thought and when and who was supposed to be with me. All of those expectations start to just shift away from us. And it begins with physically going through and clearing clutter in your house, in your car, in your life, just in general. And I'll stop for a second and just say, has anyone had this experience, or any questions that I can answer before we go further? Is any of this resonating?
Oh, definitely having a career change, later in life. There's been a lot of days where I've fired myself in the evening and hired myself back in the morning. because I'm going, oh, this is too hard. But, when you get tired, it's natural that your energy is lower. But then in the morning, things always look better and you're going, no, I'm doing this for these reasons. And
Yep.
yeah, there's obstacles, and it's no surprise. So let's get after it again.
Don, I'm glad you said that, because to me, it's like, and we will talk about self-care as well. We have to take really good care of ourselves at this time, because if we get exhausted and fatigued, we're overwhelmed easily. And then it does look really like, let's just go back to what we had. It was so much easier than how hard this is. And you're right. In the morning, you're refreshed and energized. But then we can also work to find ways to keep that energized self going throughout the day by taking good care of ourselves, right? Exactly.
Exactly. And, guarding against all the negativity that's out there, trying to stay focused on your path rather than just being bombarded with squirrel, oh, bad, war, depression, recession, blah, blah.
And we'll talk some about the community that you need to support you, because you do need other people to help you. There isn't, Dorothy had the Tin Man and the Lion-Hearted and the Scarecrow, right? The Hobbit had Sam or Bilbo or whoever it was, the Lord of the Rings. He had his friend Sam and this little entourage of people that helped and assisted. And we'll visit about that as well. It's very important who the community is around you and how they help you, and vice versa, how you help others, right? Again, we can only walk our path, but we can support each other in the paths we walk. Yeah. Okay. It is funny to me because I'll have clients that say, oh no, I don't have to clear clutter. Now my house looks great. And then a week later they'll come back and go, oh my God, I can't believe it. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to throw everything away. Or I had my daughter come over and take every piece of clothing out of my house. I went and bought a few simple pieces, and I'm living such a simple life now. And we'll build it back up, and then the next round of transformation, we'll get some more clutter going and gone. But this clearing is important, physically, but also emotionally and mentally. Okay, great. Well,
Laureen, what are your thoughts on like digital clutter? I think there's an element to that I find I struggle more with digital clutter than I do with physical clutter, right? It's like you get on that subscription list and then you feel an obligation to read that email, and it just becomes overwhelming digital mental clutter versus physical clutter.
My thought on that, Dara, is it's exactly the same as the clutter in my house.
Yep.
It just fills up the space. So there's no room for anything new. Whether it's in our computers. Think about the photos that we have on our phones, and then we have to buy storage space for it. Or I'm always amazed at how many self-store places there are in our country. People are paying $90, $150 a month to store a bunch of stuff that they haven't looked at for 3 years, but they'll pay that money every month to keep all that stuff in case they need it, because there's no room in their house because their house is completely stuffed with things. The
Right.
simple life is a blessing.
And the storage cost frequently exceeds the value of what you're storing.
Absolutely. There was, I think, at one point in my life where I had like 3 storage units. And when it came time to get rid of them, it was just like, there is nothing in any of those that I want. Why was I paying money to save all that stuff in case I needed it, right? So yeah, we evolve into wanting simpler lives. And again, if you're so filled up, there's no space for anything new. But once you empty the space around you in your mind, on your computer, in your home, then suddenly now there's room for new things, for new ways of being, for new ways of doing. And so that's really what you're doing as you clear out that clutter. And then the next level is letting go of all that stuff from the past about who am I? Who was I supposed to be? Where was I supposed to be at this point in my life? We spend a lot of time reflecting on that and being upset or angry or frustrated by that, when in fact, that's the time when we could be most joyful, but we're busy being sad and miserable instead. So part of this process that we go through leads us to discover who we are. And, you can argue, well, we were born our essential self. And I might say that's very true. We get lost about who we are. We get distracted. I find, for example, roles really take over my life. And suddenly I'm playing out roles, but I forgot who I was. And so when I got married, I became the wife. When I had children, I became the mother. And I did all of these things that I thought mothers and wives were supposed to be doing without really being intentional about it. And then as I can evolve and let that stuff go away, I'm not going to define myself as a wife. I'm not going to define myself as a mother. Now I get to choose who I want to be in relation to my daughter. I get to choose who I want to be in relationship to the people that I love the most, versus I'm fulfilling some role that somewhere along the lines I was told this was how it's supposed to be. And I do truly believe the more intentional you are in your relationships with people, including yourself, then the more complex and rich and deep those things can become. So as you journey on this path of transformation, first you start to meet your shadow. When we reach a place of uncertainty, there is fear, there's discomfort, there's anxiety. And when we are kind of in our backup modes, the uglier side of ourself comes out. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, we want to try to eliminate that. I just don't want to have a shadow. And I'm here to tell you, no, you're going to have a shadow. And sometimes your shadow self is good because you need that. But not always. And self-knowledge is the key to understanding that, for example, I know I'm a driver. I can get really direct, and I can be assertive and aggressive and demanding of people when I am feeling stressed out. Sometimes that's needed. Sometimes that's not so needed. So I've learned to recognize when that side of me is coming up and to assert it when necessary, but also to say, this isn't who I want to be in this moment. This isn't how I want to behave in this moment. But again, the only way that you can make those choices is if you're aware, what is your shadow self? How does it come out? And then do you want it to come out, or are you wanting to tone that down a little bit and move in a different direction when you are dealing with the world or dealing with other people? So part of the path of transformation is to begin to see that shadow coming out and naming it, defining it, understanding what triggers it, and then working with it so that it serves you versus hurts you. And then at the same time, the other thing that starts to emerge more clearly is your spirit, who you are on a spiritual level. And out of that, this play between the shadow and the spirit, you begin to get greater clarity around exactly who you are. And my whole life has been an evolving process of getting clearer and clearer about who I am, how I want to show up for myself and for the people that I love and for the world, and then making intentional, conscious choices about doing exactly that. And to me, this is probably the most valuable piece of the transformational journey, is that you get to discover yourself. I recently ran across a quote that I have just embraced in my life. And it basically is something along the lines of, the obstacle is the way, or the obstacle is the path. And what happens when I am on a journey and I face an obstacle is then my shadow comes out. My desire to control things, to fix stuff, to take charge. But then if I can breathe and calm myself down, my spirit can also come out and say, let's be curious about what's going to happen. And so the journey itself becomes facing the obstacle. I was sharing earlier, I went to Sedona recently with several other women, and we had a great week of hiking. And I had done most of the planning for the trip. And so I had this detailed little plan of all the places we were going to go and all the things we were going to do. And sure enough, we had to start throwing things out and re-modifying the plan. And things didn't always turn out the way we thought they would. Like we went to a trailhead that actually was locked, and we had to find out where the actual bus was that would drive us to the trailhead, because they weren't allowing cars to park at this trailhead. And so it took us another hour to figure that out. So we got a late start, and it was hot while we were hiking, and so I could go into my head and go, everything went wrong. I'm furious, I'm mad. And then the shadow would come out about trying to control things. And it's like, we got to get through this faster and faster because it's just hot, hot, hot. We can't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or I could just take a deep breath and say, wow, this was our journey. The four of us together had to figure all this stuff out. And because of that, we got to know each other better. Because of that, we had more interdependency, and it was less about what I'd planned and more about the type of day that we as four women hiking together wanted to create. And that was so much more pleasant to me than me trying to control everything and then blame myself because it didn't go exactly as planned. So I'm hoping that kind of gives you an example of how the shadow and the spirit emerge together. And then out of that comes, I like who I am. I like the fact that I don't have to control everything. I like the fact that I can share responsibility with other people on how our day progresses. And I like the idea of being curious and creative in how the day turns out versus controlling and angry. So that's what's going to happen on this journey. If you let it, you're going to experience your shadow, you're going to experience your spirit, and out of that will eventually evolve out of play, a more clear idea about who you are.
So you're not talking about a religious thing. You're talking about your true nature of who you really were before all these other things took energy.
And it could be a religious thing depending on who you are, right?
Right.
Because in terms of religion, it's closely linked to what your spirit is, and it could be. So, for example, one of the women in our group happened to be very religious, and so a lot of that for her was about God's plan. And for her, she had a different experience than I had, but we all had the same experience, if that makes sense. We all experienced the same physical conditions of the day, but then we each took away different learnings.
Yeah, your mental approach is going to, relate to how that experience unfolds.
Every expectation that you have, right? There was a time in my life when I was 20, I was this driver, and it was like I had 5 things that we were going to accomplish, and sure enough, we are going to get those things done. I am just going to push until we get those things done. And over time, less and less am I interested in forcing things to happen according to the plan. And more and more as I've gotten older, am I excited about what are the possibilities of how this could turn out. And I'm so much happier, honestly. I'm so much happier the latter way. I'm not resisting anymore. I'm being creative and joyful. So, but I mean, that's my evolution, right? It could be completely different for someone else. But it is knowing that I'm going to encounter my shadow. It is knowing that I am going to encounter my spirit, and out of that will evolve. Who do I want to be? How do I want to behave? I always go back to my daughter, she went to school in Chicago. And one winter she was visiting, and we had this incredible snowstorm that got everyone delayed with flights. And she left at 11 o'clock at night. And she ended up being stranded in some airport, not Chicago, but they'd landed the plane in some part of Illinois or Minnesota or something. And she called me and she goes, "Mom, everyone is losing their mind on this plane. We are sitting here. They're telling us we can get on a bus to Chicago. We can wait and see if in the next hour something opens up and we can get, into Chicago on our flight, or we can all get off the plane, get a hotel and try to go tomorrow." And she goes, and everyone is upset and angry. And some of these people are like yelling. And I'm like, okay, well, who do you want? I go, first off, that you're going to get to Chicago. She goes, well, yeah, eventually I'm going to get there. But who do you want to be when you land? And she was like, what do you mean? I said, who do you want to be? Do you want to be one of those people that are yelling and screaming and being mad and nasty to the people that are trying to help you? Do you want to be one of those people that it takes on a leadership role and tries to help calm people down and help people see the options and choices in front of them? And, you know, she was like, well, I never really thought about it that way. And so it's like, but yes, if you start to think about during this process of craziness, during this process of uncertainty, who do I want to be? And you can answer that and then start being what you're talking about. It's a completely different experience than if you just react, right?
Yeah, I think you have control over how you perceive it. So it's, you could focus on, well, we can't do this and we can't do that. Or what could we do? Or what if we did this? Or
Well, when you are calm, you actually see those things, right?
Right. And
When
not
you're
follow
angry,
it.
you don't see the choices. What you see are the limitations.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think if you think about how you want to be at the end, it changes how you are in the moment, right? And
Exactly.
it's and you could do it the other way too. You could just make that conscious choice of how do I want to approach this and how do I want this to impact me. If you can't get past how to even think about how you want it to be in the end, you can say how you want it not to have it feel right now, right? Because it's such, you can get so in a loop of negativity, anxiety, frustration, and stress. And there are times when that is necessary, fight or flight, but
Mhm.
if it's not one of those, how do you just flip it?
Exactly. And asking that question, what do I want? Who do I want to be? Asking those kinds of questions empowers you to make conscious choices and calm yourself down enough to start taking advantage of the choices in front of you. And to me, that's very powerful. I also know that stress is a killer. Stress makes us sick. Chronic stress, yeah, it can lead to death ultimately. So, you know, and as we age, we just don't need any more stress than we've already gone through. It's time to calm down and relax and have some fun with our lives instead of this craziness that we thought somehow got us through, but it ends up hurting us. All right. So one blessing, a big blessing of this journey is to discover more about who you are. One of the other things that happens is we have to start challenging ourselves to see things in different ways. So I always think of, let me give you an example. I had one earlier and I've forgotten it already. So I'll think of a new one here. Something happens. So let's say the company I'm working for, I'm 60 and the company I work for is being bought out. And I have the choice of taking a package and either getting a new job or retiring or doing whatever it is I want to do, or I can stay in this job for as long as they still want me to keep working for them. It might last forever, it might not. I can look at that and say, I had no control over any of this, and I am the victim. Or I can say, how lucky am I that I have these choices in front of me, and now I get to choose. See the difference between the two, right? So I'll throw another idea out. I am married, and my husband and I are now in our 60s, and I'm thinking it's time to retire and travel. And he's telling me, because of the economy, we can't afford to do that right now. And so we need to keep working for a couple more years in order to then be able to do all the traveling that we want to do later. So again, I can take that and go, well, that's not how it's supposed to be. We were supposed to have this plan where when we were 60, we were going to, or 65, we were going to retire. We were going to go on this trip. We had this all outlined, and now my whole life is ruined because I don't get to do what we've been planning for years. Or I can come back and say, all right, well, let's say we work for another 2 years together. We say we'll play a game of how much money can we save so that we can retire when we're 62 instead of waiting until we're 65. And for the next 2 years, we're just going to have this fun time together of building up our savings so that we can take advantage of our desire to travel and get ourselves out there on the road when we hit 62. Again, it's about reframing what's in front of us. not being the victim, but rather looking for a story that gives us choices, that empowers us. And so one of the biggest skills that you can develop through the process of transformation is to learn how to discern, and then to learn how to reframe. And so discernment is really about being able to observe something that's happening to you without telling a story. So it wasn't that we were bad people. You know, we could tell the story, well, we were fools. We invested in the stock market. We should never have done that. We didn't know what we were doing, and or we listened to advisors that didn't know what they were doing. And we just start telling this big old story. And what I would tell my clients, what I tell myself is stop telling the story and let's just talk about what has happened. And so it might be the economy is in a recession, and no control over that. It might be that tech stocks are down right now, but I know they're going to go back up later. So it's more about what are the actual details? What are the actual points that have happened versus let me tell you this whole giant story about how foolish we were or how smart we were, right? You can tell positive stories, you can tell negative stories. But when you start telling a story, usually there is a moral, right? There's an ending that you draw a conclusion from. And more often than not, people draw a negative conclusion that somehow they were a victim, or somehow they were wronged, or somehow they made a mistake. And to me, getting rid of the story gets rid of the judgment around whatever is happening and allows you to look at the actual events. And then you can reframe, and here you come back and you tell yourself a story. Now you're going to tell yourself a new story, but that new story is going to be one that's positive for you, that is going to give you hope, give you encouragement. And here's my story I was thinking about earlier today. When I turned 60, I woke up one day and I said, you know, I have had all these dreams about travel and I have not traveled in years. And this was in 2019. And so there was several places I've always wanted to go. Machu Picchu was one of them. So I called up my youngest daughter and I said, and my oldest, and I said, I really want to go to Machu Picchu. Do either of you want to come? My oldest couldn't based on whatever was going on in her life, but my youngest could. And so we started planning this trip, and sure enough, we got booked. And then it occurred to me that I was, at that time, I was about 65 pounds heavier than I am now, totally out of shape. And I realized that if I wasn't, we were going to go and I wasn't going to be able to walk up the mountain, so to speak. I wasn't going to be able to walk through. I wasn't fit enough. I was certain to walk through this monument, this site. So I started walking. I would walk 10 minutes a day. Then I would walk 15 minutes a day. And then I would walk 20 minutes a day. By the time we went on the trip, I had built up enough endurance. I had lost some weight that I was actually able to go through and do see this site and experience it fully. In fact, when we were there that morning, the guide had said, well, some of you may not be able to make it to the full site. Who in the group would not like to do that? We have an alternative activity for you. And my youngest looked at me and she said, well, Mom, if you don't want to go, it's okay. We can do the other alternative activity. And I looked at her and I said, I have come this far. I am going. If you want to go do the alternative activity, you go for it, girlfriend. But I will be on that trail and I will be hiking through that site because I came to see that site. And sure enough, we did it. Within about 5 minutes of walking through, there was a woman ahead of us who actually passed out, and she fell onto the rocks, and they had to call an emergency crew in and help her get off the site. And I was just thinking, oh, but for the grace of God, that could be me. But we made it through and we had a grand time. Then I left Peru and came home and realized that I wanted to do more of this. And so over the next year and a half, I completely lost weight. I started going to a gym. I was hiking. I have become an avid hiker, an avid traveler, and I have transformed physically my whole life so that I can do the things that I want to do. The next thing you know, and here's the part about the reframing. I start hiking with my oldest daughter a lot here in the Boise area, and we do the Idaho Grand Slam together. And after that, the last Grand Slam, she came to me and she said, Mom, I need you to hear what I have to say. And I'm like, uh-oh, what's going on now? And she said, you need to get some new friends. And I was like, what? She goes, I can't hike with you as much as you want to hike. And so I have to tell you no. And she goes, I feel really bad because you only asked me to hike. So you need to get some new friends, Mom, that will hike with you. And what I heard was, my daughter doesn't want to hike with me anymore. I'm not fast enough for her. I'm not, so I started telling myself this whole story about why my daughter doesn't want to hike with me. And there I was in story and me feeling bad. And then it was like, well, let's stop for a minute and ask some more questions and let's discern what actually is going on. And literally, I was trying to go every week, and she just has a life. She can't just go hiking with me every time I ask her to. And eventually I joined other groups, and I now have lots of friends that are my age that hike with me. So it became a really positive thing, but I had to stop telling myself the story that my daughter thinks I'm a terrible hiker. She'd never want to spend time with me, that I'm too slow, that I'm not good enough for her as a hiker. To get myself to a point where I can do this, I can make new friends, I can find people who will hike with me. And in fact, I did. I opened myself up to new experiences, signed up for hiking trips and hiking journeys with different women through Facebook. And now I have a probably 15 women that I can call up anytime and say, would you like to go on a hike? And in fact, I have more people that want to hike with me than I have time to hike with, right? So it's about not telling yourself that story, and then getting really clear on what is really going on, and then reframing that into, I can do this. I'm an adventurer. There must be lots of women my age who want to go hiking. Why wouldn't I be able to do that? In fact, I led hikes on Sedona. I led this whole Sedona trip to do hiking. Again, that's just an example of that. Stop for a minute, take yourself out of the story, get clear about what's going on, and then reframe the story in a more positive way that suits you. Over time, what happens then is you start to get, and this is this other half of the journey, you start to get clearer and clearer about who you are and what you want, and you're able to stay focused on that. And then as you get more and more focused on what it is that you love to do, what is it that gives you joy, then your life becomes full of joyful moments. Make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah. You'll see when I post on Facebook, it's like I always hashtag following my bliss. I really, and when I talk to my clients or when I talk to my friends, tell me what makes you happy, and then do that. Just do that. Just keep doing that. Don't do anything that doesn't make you happy. Just do what makes you happy, what brings you joy. And over time, your whole life becomes just a series of joy. And that joy spreads to the people that you experience life with, and they also have joy. And you're less focused on all the negatives and all of the pain and the suffering and the misery that goes on in this world, which there is plenty of, but I just don't have time for it. Right?
I like to always, parallel things with nature. So when I'm growing a garden, when it started, it's just weeds. But if you pull out the weeds and then you displace those things with things that you want to have growing, pretty soon there's no room for the weeds.
Exactly. And you have a garden full of things that you love, right?
Right, exactly.
Yes.
Put in the things you want and get rid of the things you don't.
Oh, and people are so funny. They'll be like, but I have to do this. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to do that unless it gives you joy. If it doesn't give you joy, just say you're not doing it. Someone else will step up and do it. I promise. Someone else will get it done. You don't have to do it. It works for me and for most of my clients, but you just have to discipline yourself. What's going on right now? What's the story that gives me joy? That's what I'm doing.
Yeah,
so that's,
we had processes that, sometimes I'd go, well, does anybody really even use that? Well, let's just stop doing it and see if anybody complains. And I guess nobody was using it.
Nobody even noticed, right? Exactly.
Right.
But boy, we had to do that. We will stay up till midnight to get that done. Yes, we'll kill ourselves for that, but yeah, follow your bliss. All right, then another piece to the journey is you have to begin to face your fears. So again, in that unknown world, everything is uncertain, and if you're like me, your imagination can go wild. I have been accused of having catastrophic thinking. One thing happens that isn't necessarily positive, and I can take it all the way. I can run with it for miles in terms of how the end of the world has come, and that I'm going to be a bag lady on the street with 5 cats that I'm carrying around, trying to feed them, and I'm eating their food for dinner because there's no money left in the bank. And I am working to learn how to stop that crazy thinking and to instead pay attention to what's going on, reframe, and move forward. But also, when you're on this journey, you have to start figuring out what you're afraid of and then working really hard to manage the emotions that go with it, and to cultivate fear. And I want to talk to cultivate courage. What I want to talk about tonight, just briefly, is just this idea of courage. You know, people have this idea that if you're courageous, then you have no fear. And what I'm here to say is no. You will do it in spite of the fear. And I think Georgia O'Keeffe said something once that I was dumbfounded by. She said, I have the fear all the time, but I do it in spite of the fear. And I journal, I journey, I hike. I'm about to go to Ireland, and I'm going to climb a mountain that my fear would say I can't possibly do, but I've hired a guide and I'm walking up that mountain. And I was talking to a friend about how afraid I was. And she said, what's the worst that could happen? And I said, well, the worst is I could decide I just can't go on, and we'd have to turn around. And she looked at me and she said, well, when was the last time that happened to you on a trail, that you actually turned around? And I was like, well, actually, it's never happened. I've always managed to make it. And she said, so you have no evidence from your past that says this is going to be the case. And I'm like, well, no, actually, I don't. And she said, then why are you worried about it? And I was sort of like, well, yeah, I guess, and then I go, but it could be the first time that it could happen to me. And she's like, well, okay, well, so what if it does? I go, well, then I guess I just walk back down the mountain. And she's like, well, exactly.
What's the worst thing that could happen? You turn around and walk down, right?
Yeah. And then I'm like, well, yeah, you're right. It's really not that bad, so I guess I'll just not be worried about it.
Laureen, if I could just jump in, one of my similar fears was about being a bag lady.
Yes.
And so I paid a lot of money to go on an experiential occasion. And one of the things that we did was they had us take off, we had to pull all these clothes out of these big bins of kind of ratty clothes. We had to take off all of our jewelry. They put on these clothes that we pulled out. They put us on a bus and they took us to various parts. So I was in San Diego and I went downtown San Diego where there's a lot of homeless. And I did something that was so true to what I always do is I found a teacher. I found a very handsome homeless man who said, you look like you're pretty new on the street and don't know what to do. And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, I'll help you. And I made this great friend of this homeless man for a short period of time. And he taught me, don't look them in the eye, and here's what you say, and here's how you do this. And my assignment was just to be able to feed myself lunch, to get enough money to be able to feed myself lunch. And I not only fed myself lunch, I bought him lunch too, because I was able to ask for money. And you know what? People don't like to look at you in the face, but I now know if for some reason that were to happen to me, highly unlikely, I know how to do it. And, I already had my worst fear. I did it. It was weird. It was nerve-wracking, but I overcame an illusion of being homeless.
Well, I applaud you for doing that. I that took a lot of courage, right?
Yep.
And then once you face that fear, it's not so hard to push through and just see what happens. And then you move into that place of curiosity. Well, what is going to happen? How will I get through this? What will come out of that? And it sounds like a really unique experience for you.
It was very
Yeah.
magical. It was very magical.
So, yeah,
I
it's
think
that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what is the worst thing that could happen is a really, really powerful question. And whatever your transformation is, whether it's forced or chosen, right? And I forget the words you used, but whether it's
Yeah.
put upon you or chosen by you, I think I've only found myself asking myself that question when it's been forced upon me, or I've been so desperate I had to do something different. But I think it's a really interesting concept to challenge yourself. Well, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? What's the worst thing that could happen? Because, I made in my case, and it was very powerful, I finally asked myself that question and left a toxic job because, put myself at risk and said, I have to do something different. And the worst thing that's going to happen is I would lose my house and lose my car. And when I boiled it down to that's 4 wheels and 4 walls, it didn't mean I was going to be homeless. It just mean I wasn't going to live where I lived, and it was a powerful question. What's the worst?
Right.
It's a great question to ask ourselves, and then do it anyway, right? We do it anyway. And part of it too is just then I go back to the managing the emotions piece, being able to name our emotions. A lot of people can't. They don't know they don't know the difference between anxiety and fear. So starting to learn to be able to say, oh, this is anxiety that I'm having, or no, I'm really afraid, or I'm frustrated. Okay. And then beginning to say, I have choices about how I feel. I have choices about how I think. I'm intentional. So what do I want to do? Who do I want to be? What do I want to have happen? And then how can I begin to play with the scenario around me to make those things become my reality versus the nightmare that I'm terrified of? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So we cultivate courage by doing it anyway. And the more we do it, the less afraid we are, right? It's true. All righty. Well, we have tools to help us. First one is just the whole idea of affirmations. And you probably have heard about affirmation, but if you haven't, an affirmation is just simply a positive statement, and it could be anything from, I am competent and capable, and I can face whatever is in front of me. And so we keep repeating in our head, verbally, if we want to speak it, or in our heads. Sometimes I have clients who have tattoos that remind them of things, or of that rubber band that they click and that reminds them of things, or something that just recreates a thought process in your head that affirms you're competent, you're intelligent, you're graceful, you're clever, you're adventurous. Who are you? So when you start answering that question, like I answer that question a lot with, I am somebody who is adventurous. I like and love to be on adventures. So I don't shy away from those. And that's an affirmation for me. I am adventurous. We have records in our brain about who we are, and we're told who we are from the time we're born. Basically, we get messages about who we are. And those records become ingrained in us. So there's just like a wheel that spins around and it just keeps repeating and repeating itself. We change those records by repeating out loud, and even by having others help us affirm who we are becoming, who we truly are, who our essential self is. So you might have 3 or 4 or 5 affirmations that would help remind you this is who you are, and you're going to live your life accordingly. So affirmations is one skill. Another skill is journaling. I do a funny thing with my journaling. When I journal, I write everything out and then I shred it. I don't keep a copy of it anywhere. I just immediately shred it. It's, for me, the self-reflection that occurs when I journal is about a situation, something I'm struggling with, facing, something I'm excited about, but whatever, I journal it. But I don't want a record of it in my house somewhere. I need to express it. And then once it's expressed and I've worked through it, I just put it in the shredder. Some people keep them, volumes of them, and they'll have their children inherit them and they can read all about their lives. Doesn't matter which way you prefer, but journaling, writing things out is one way to help you get clear about what's going on and who do you want to be? What do you want to have happen? So it's something I recommend to people when they're going through a process of transformation. Take some time to just journal, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a book. Another
I've had a
skill-
similar experience with, I have a vivid imagination and can create catastrophes, but when you verbalize it to someone else and they hear it, then you go, the likelihood of that happening is probably pretty small. So if you're writing it and you don't have anybody to talk to, I could see where that would be just as useful as you get out in the world and out of your head. And then
exactly.
you can
And
rationalize it a little better.
On a piece of paper or even in a computer, right? It takes on a life of its own once it's expressed, and then you can start to let it go. Yep. Another tool that I highly recommend is meditation. I prefer the kind of meditation that's guided imagery. I can do the meditation quiet in a room by myself, but my mind really wanders. So the guided meditations give me more structure. Lots of tools online to help you with that. But spending time morning, I try to start my morning with a few minutes of meditation. I try to end my day before I close my eyes at night with a few minutes of meditation, just letting go and letting my body relax and feel what it feels when I'm not thinking about anything, when I've shut my mind off. I could spend an hour and a half talking to you about your mind and how it talks to you and tricks you into all kinds of craziness. And it does, and it will, especially these moments when we go through transformation, the monkey mind comes out and wants to explain to you all the things that are going to go wrong and how to prepare and protect yourself, because you're really risking it all by doing whatever it is you're doing. But it's just a thought, and thoughts come and they go, and meditation helps you to see that. So again, meditation, journaling, affirmations, all can be a part of your toolkit. And it needs to become, in my mind, I tell my clients, these need to become disciplines for you. They're not optional. You don't do them only when you feel bad. You need to do them all the time so that when you do feel bad, they are automatic for you and you just slide right in. And also, if you do them every day, you tend to not feel so bad because you're managing your emotions, you're managing your thoughts as you go, so you don't get too far out of control before you need to pull yourself back in. The other tool that I highly recommend is self-care to my clients, that you need to make time to take care of yourself, whether it's eating the right foods, healthy foods, whether it's getting the sleep that you need, whether it's, taking time to get massages or to go for walks or whatever it is that soothes and heals you personally, but making self-care a part of your life, which you would think for all of us, that should be a normal thing. But we have grown up in a society where it says, put off today your self-care so that you can get that stuff done. And then, next week or next year, you can take that 2-week vacation and really take good care of yourself then. Self-care needs to become a task, a daily discipline for you as well. So tools there for you to develop, to work on. And then the other piece to the journey that I talk to my clients about is sharing that journey. Most of us want to do it by ourselves, or we think we do. So we think we're the only one going through this. We're embarrassed, we're ashamed, we don't want anyone else to know, so we hide. The pandemic was a huge opportunity to isolate. And what I found is, like, I have fitness clients who literally went nowhere for 2 years. They stayed in their house. And even still, I come to their house to work out because they're still anxious about going out in public still today. And they've isolated themselves. And when you isolate, you lose your perspective. When you push through your isolation and you seek people to share your experiences with, your expectations, your perspective, everything expands. And you have more choices. So one of the things I tell clients on this journey is, first, you need to be aware of who are your allies. And this is not necessarily your friends, although your friends can be allies. In the hero's journey, there will be people who walk the journey with you because they're on their own journey and your paths coincide. But there are also people who support you. So an ally can be someone who supports what you're doing, but they don't necessarily share your experience. They just encourage you. They're there to help in any way they can when needed. But then also you have to start reaching out like I did. I needed to find other women who were around my age who wanted to hike, because my daughter was an ally. She was there to support me as I needed it, but she could not spend the time hiking with me that I needed in order to build up my skills and to get physically fit. I had to find other people who wanted to share that part of the journey with me. So we seek to break through any isolation, and sometimes that's a huge challenge. We look for who are the allies in our lives that can help us. And actually the Learn organization is a great ally in many respects, right? But then we also seek closer relationships with people who want to share the journey with us and at some level, and walk a similar path. And this is hard work. I was talking to someone today, we were hiking, and she said that, her experience as we've gotten older is we don't know how to make friends. Women just don't know how to reach out and make new friends. We have kind of old mindsets about what a friend is, and the whole world has changed and evolved. And then we don't know how to actually be a friend, let alone have a friend. And so it becomes a whole new skill set around how do we build community with others. And then linked to that is, as you evolve through this process, you begin to take the road home. And we'll talk in a minute about what the hero actually achieves or accomplishes. But towards the very end, the last 20% of the journey is the route home. And the route home is back to the ordinary world. The heroes don't go off into outer space and live on a whole nother planet. The heroes in the story don't go live in an astral space. All of us come back to what would be called the ordinary world. And we have to re-enter that ordinary world with intention. A lot of us just think, oh my gosh, it's finally over. I've evolved, I've changed, and now I can just, sit down here and live my life out normally. I'm here to tell you, not really, because you have changed now. And you are going back to a structured life, a life that's a little more predictable. And what does that look like for you? Well, a big thing about the hero's journey is you have achieved some kind of treasure. You've earned a treasure. The treasure can be that I've evolved and grown into a more conscious and aware human being. Now I have to live my life as a more evolved and conscious human being. It could be that I have become more adventurous, and now I'm going to live my life as someone who does a lot of adventuring. What does that look like? But I still have to get up and make my breakfast and make my bed and pay my bills and do all those things that are a part of ordinary living. So when we end our journey, you'll know when it happens. You just know you're no longer seeking. You've got great clarity. You have changed, and you wake up and you know that you have changed. Then you have to begin to integrate that change into living a normal life, quote unquote, or an ordinary life is maybe another way of saying it. How do you take what you've learned about yourself and life and use that to express yourself in the new life that you're living? But beyond that, you also have a gift that you are bringing back from your journey. And here Joseph Campbell would tell you every hero has this gift, and it is their story. And that every hero who goes on this journey has an obligation to return to the community they came from, to the ordinary world, and share their story. And the reason why you find this hero's journey in every culture is because all of us need to be inspired to live our journeys, to walk our journeys. And we do that by listening to the stories other people have about their journey. And it may be you just tell your family and your friends. It may be that you write a book. It may be that you make a movie, and you reach masses of people. It doesn't matter. But what matters is, because you've gone through this process, because you are changed, You're working hard to integrate your new life into the ordinary world, but you are also at a place where you can share your story and inspire others. And then finally, one of the characters that you'll meet potentially on your journey is a mentor. It can be a teacher, it can be a coach, such as myself, but you find someone like you see, I think Gandalf, right? Or the Wizard of Oz. There are people that have some other knowledge, some offering to assist and support you in your journey. You can do your journey without a mentor, but I like to tell my clients it's a lot easier if you have a mentor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it doesn't matter how many, but have people who have walked their path and they are willing to not only share their story, but actually help guide you. It can be a coach, it can be a great friend. It doesn't have to be someone that you spend the rest of your life with, but look for the mentors in your life because they are there to help you make sense of the journey that you're on. And with that, the description is ended. We're starting to get close to the end of our time. I'm just going to throw it out for questions and see if I can answer any that you might have, or if you want to talk further, there's my contact information and we can connect at another point in time.
How many, just a question for you, Laureen, you know, this transformation journey, it can be a cycle, right? So, I mean, how many cycles? Is this something you should be continuously looking towards, or are there triggers?
I think if I look at my life, I could probably identify 5 major journeys, but I think, you know, at once things calm down, then I evolve into another. And sometimes they're small and sometimes they're huge. But I think if you are evolving, as I believe is what our human nature is, you're constantly on some journey or another. Some of them are small, some of them are huge. When we get older, I think there's an opportunity for some huge journeys because of all the things that can happen to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, I look at my life and I can think of 5, 6 times that I've made some major shifts. Earlier in my life, they were not by choice. I felt like I was pushed into them because I clung too hard. I heard the call, but I wouldn't answer it because I liked things the way they were. I didn't want to change. And as I've gotten older, I'm more inclined to embrace them because I enjoy them.
You can
Wisdom.
even switch it around and, you know, there's enjoyment in being a mentor rather than just being mentored.
Mm-hmm.
And giving back, you know, to your community, whether it's something you do for fun or something you did professionally or something in between. Oh, that's
Absolutely
enriching, rewarding experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Don.
Well, and becoming a mentor is a transformation of its own, right? It's
Right.
It's a whole new role, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Other thoughts, questions?
Well, this has been one of the better sessions that I have attended and packed with value.
Well, good.
This has been fantastic.
Well, you know what I have found is if you have a way to think about what's happening to you, if you have a frame to put it in, then it's a lot easier to deal with. So it's sort of like, well, then now I can see why I'm trying to go back to the old way of being. Okay, and I don't want to do that. Or, oh, now I see that this is a challenge to, you know, my shadow. Or, oh, now I see this is a chance for me to see and get clear about who I want to be. So who do I want to be, right? So, and also it ends. It does end. It doesn't go on forever, which sometimes when you're going through these transformations, you feel like it's never going to stop. Yeah.
You know, one of the things for me in my many transformations over time was some of the work that I did around being very conscious in defining what my personal values are.
Mm-hmm.
And what do I value the most? What's most important? And to come into congruency with my values. And unfortunately, that that meant letting go of things that I maybe had in my life for a long time, but they were not congruent with who I was and who I wanted to become more fully. And so I found, I think it's Jack Canfield's book, The Success Principles, really helped me kind of walk through that process and define that. And then it also was helpful in decision making because things either aligned or they didn't align with my values. And, you know, it made decision making much quicker for some things.
I think Dee, anytime you have something that causes you to be reflective and thoughtful about your life and lead you to make conscious choice is valuable, incredibly valuable through this transformational process. The clearer we can be about who we are and what we want, and that we deserve that, right? The easier it is to say yes to the things that we love and that bring us joy, and the easier it is to say no thank you. I'm sure somebody else wants that and it's there for them when they're ready, but it's just not for me. Yeah.
I have a question about resources relating to the issue of isolation. I'm 100% guilty of isolation. I'm 2 years post-divorce and I've lived in my apartment for 2 years, and I just really don't know where to go, how to get out there. I'm not looking to date. I'm just looking to make friends and find activities to make myself busy with. I've tried the senior center a couple of times and it didn't stick. So I was wondering if you know of any other resources in the area that I could look to.
One of the places that I would suggest, and Shelley, I'm not sure what all your interests are, but have you heard of Meetup?
Yes.
So I would go and look at Meetup and look at some of the groups that are formed there and that are having active activities.
Okay.
And then for me, I have found, like, for example, for hiking, I joined a group called Girls Who Hike Idaho. And there's, I think, almost 10,000 members, and they hike regularly. I'm a part of another group called Summit Sisters, who are women who climb mountains. And I sign up and go to those things. So check Facebook as well. Search for groups that are related to interests that you have. There are book clubs. There is hiking. There are needlepoint. There are, there's probably a group for anything you could think of. Do a search on Facebook and then join a whole bunch of them and watch and see how they interact with each other. And then go to some events, go to some activities.
Okay. All right.
That's how I got started. Yeah.
I agree, Laureen, that really any kind of event that is something that you're interested in is where you will meet other people who are interested in similar things. So Meetup, I think, is an excellent suggestion. I think about where I met my honey 12 and a half years ago. We were at what used to be called Center up on Hill Road, and it was a collective James O'Day. Pretty esoteric, but you know, I was going there with some friends and I just happened to sit next to this man who, when he bumped shoulders with me, sent electricity through my body. And here we are 12 years later, but it was only because we both had interest in this very bizarre topic, which was collective storytelling and meditation. So
yeah, I would just search for groups and then once you meet someone, ask them what groups they're in. Right? And have them invite you. You know, church is also a good place to meet people when I go to a service. And I've always found churches to be full of very friendly people. So that would be another option. But the hard part is you have to make yourself go. Because, you know, you can watch online and go, oh, that one looks like fun. And, oh, but, you know, and then you just have to go. You know, I'm going to be the slowest hiker. Who cares? You just go and I'll get in line in the back. And then I'll walk with the slowest women. But then the next time before the hike's over, we're talking about, let's meet up next Saturday and we'll go for a hike ourselves together. You know, and over time, it's that making friends. We just don't know how to do it as we get older because we've been so busy with our families and with our jobs and with our lives that we forgot how to do it.
Right.
But there's so many people that we're so lonely, especially after the last 2 years.
Yeah.
right.
So ask the question, what's the worst that can happen?
Exactly. What's the worst that could happen? Nothing terrible's happened yet. Yeah, I'll have too many friends.
That's
Oh,
right.
terrible.
Tough problem to have.
So, and Shelley, friend me, I'll invite you to something.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I do that all the time. All right, I'm going to stop the share, D, and take it back to you.
Okay, good. And it says I should be sharing my screen. Do you see the thank you? Wonderful. Well, Laureen, thank you so very much. What a wonderful session this was. And I loved your story through the hero's journey. We are the hero of our own story. And so I love that metaphor for your talk today, and that this is a process. Enjoy the process. It's not an event. The destination will come, but enjoy the trip, and make the trip fit for you. So thank you so much today for your presentation.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks. And once again, I would just like to say thank you to our two sponsors this semester, Oasis Senior Advisors and A Mind for All Seasons. And oops. All attendees will receive an email inviting you to join our Learn mailing list. You must confirm your subscription in order to stay on our mailing list about free community education. Typically, that's about all the things that we mail to our public mailing list. And if you don't get something the next day or two, please check your junk folder. It could be in the invitation in your mailing list or in your junk folder there. So next two classes coming up, elder abuse awareness and prevention. Boy, this is something that we all need to be aware of, hypervigilant about, and we have an excellent presenter who's doing a very dynamic job of presenting on the various types of elder abuse and what we can do to navigate our path with helping others identify as well as what to do. And then the next one for our summer session is navigating your path to retirement. So a little more, I think, functional around finances and asset management, but I'm not 100% sure. Peggy Farnsworth is presenting that one, and she is a financial advisor, a retirement coach, so to speak. And then very shortly, we will have our new dates out for the next semester. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next time.